Welcome to the Taxing Subjects Podcast. I'm Ryan Norton, and today we're going to be talking about the Taxes Security Checklist. Now, before we begin, data security has been something of a hot button issue for the tax industry over these past few years. The Security Summit, which is just a partnership between the IRS, state tax agencies, and members of the private tax industry, it was founded in 2015 to deal with the significant increase in tax-related identity theft incidents. And this checklist, the Taxes Security Checklist, is the latest in a series of outreach campaigns by the Summit. Now, joining me for this discussion is Drake Software Vice President of Internal Operations, Jami Gibson, who is also a member of basically every Security Summit working group. Welcome to the show, Jami.
Thanks, Ryan. Glad to be here.
Well, it's great to have you back. You've been on before talking about data security, and today we're going to talk about this new checklist, and I think it's going to be a really good way for people to consider how to protect their practice, their data. But we have a lot of information, so let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to do is just at a high level talk about just those 5 steps. And we have the Security 6, creating a data security plan, educating your staff about phishing emails, the signs of data theft, and then finally creating a data theft plan. And so let's just start with the first of that 5, which would be the Security 6.
Okay.
What is the Security 6, just broadly?
Broadly, it's 6 steps that the IRS, states, and industry have come up with to try to educate tax preparers and accounting offices as far as the things that they need to be doing to secure their systems and their clients' data and therefore protect themselves and their business.
And a lot of these things would probably sound familiar to anyone who may not even be in the tax industry, but who has looked into how to secure your computer or your home network or even just your office network. But the first step, antivirus software. What can we talk about with that?
So antivirus software, talk about low-hanging fruit, right? Everybody should have antivirus software running. I mean, it comes installed by default on every Windows operating system, on Macs. And one of the challenges is that running virus scanners or malware checkers can take a significant amount of time. So a lot of folks end up turning off their monthly virus scanner or turning off real-time virus scanning and malware checking because they need to have their computer operating at maximum capacity.
Right.
In addition to that, keeping the antivirus software up to date.
That's the one.
Yes, we talk a lot in the summit about what we call zero-day attacks. Have you heard of a zero-day attack?
I have.
Okay. So for those of you who may not know what it is, a zero-day attack is a new type of malware or virus software, Trojan, what have you, that is brand new to the market. And virus scanners have not been able to adjust their programming and release updates in enough time to protect the end user that may get the phishing email or that may hit a website that has been compromised that wants to download malware or Trojans. So even though zero-day attacks are very hard to prevent in the first 4 to 18 hours, most virus scanners and malware checkers do release updates within 18 hours. So as long as you're keeping your antivirus software as up to date as possible, it's as much protection as there possibly could be out there.
Absolutely.
So. And most of the attacks that we see, even especially in tax practitioner offices right now, they're not zero-day attacks. These are scams that are sometimes even months or years old. And folks continue to fall for them. And many of them are protected by their antivirus software, but not everyone is, again, because they've turned it off or they haven't kept it up to date.
Right. And as someone who knows about the need for updating not just your antivirus, but also like your operating systems, which is key.
Absolutely.
Like, I understand the feeling when you first sit down to do your work, and you have that update queued, and you're like, well, I've got a meeting that I have to get ready for in 30 minutes, and if I hit this button, then I'm not going to be prepared. And I get that impulse, but what kind of risks can you say these people might incur if they don't? Like, I personally remember the WannaCry ransomware incident, which was tied to a Windows update.
Yes. Many of the operating system updates that are put out are typically to patch security holes that have been found by hackers and fraudsters. And to your point, sometimes installing those updates takes forever. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the same situation that you were in. I was actually giving a presentation at a conference a couple months ago, and my laptop that had my presentation on it was installing updates 20 minutes before my presentation. I had to wing that one. I think I made it okay, but I feel the pain of that. And one thing that we can do to get around that is you can tell your computer what time of day to install updates. Of course, then again, that means you have to leave your computer on maybe overnight, which is not necessarily great practice.
Right.
So carving out time, kind of planning to say, okay, I'm going to install updates manually, and I'm going to check every Monday at 10:30 and clear my schedule from 10:30 to 11:30, and every Friday from 9:30 to 10:30, and clear my schedule for those times. I found that since my oopsie doops at my presentation that works really well for me. I just block it out on my calendar and say I'm not accepting any meetings, nor am I going to plan to actually get any real work done. Sorry, boss. During that hour. So.
Right. And like you're saying, just treat it like any other aspect of housekeeping in your business, because it's essential.
Right. You have to carve out time to clean out the microwave and the employee break area. So same thing.
And now the next one on our list, jumping from Antivirus Software, is firewalls. And now firewalls are something that people, they probably have heard about, but they might not understand what they are. Could you briefly explain like firewalls to the listeners? What is a firewall, and why is it important that you have it?
So a firewall is a piece of software installed on a computer, maybe a standalone computer or a network, that basically its only function is to block unauthorized incoming traffic to either that computer or to that network, meanwhile allowing the user that's authorized to use that computer or network to continue communication in any form that's digital to the outside world, basically.
All right, now the next one might be contentious for some people. Two-factor authentication.
Two-factor authentication. I'm gonna switch your wording there to multi-factor authentication.
Indeed.
There are some sites out there. Some of you may be familiar with them. You jump through 3 to 5 different types of authentication before you're allowed to access your account. So multi-factor authentication is based on the something you have and something you know and something you are. So your email address and your password, you know that, but there needs to be like a physical piece to that. And whether that's a hard token, which is like a YubiKey or RSA token that actually plugs into your computer, or whether it's some kind of soft token, which would be Google Authenticator or the RSA app. I'm not saying that people have to use Google or RSA. Those are just the ones that come to the top of my head, so that many websites and all tax software products do support multi-factor authentication. The Summit, Security Summit, we made a decision last year and this year to make that optional. And what we found is so few people opted into using multi-factor authentication that we almost thought that we were telling the IRS incorrect information, because it was like 1.4% of people. So we put our heads together a lot with the communications subgroup within the Security Summit to try to reach out to the tax prepare community to say, you know, we know this is optional, but this is really for your protection. We know it's going to take you an extra 5 seconds every time you log in because, okay, my username is Jami, my password is password 12345, and then it says, okay, so what's your multi-factor code? I'm like digging through my purse or whatever.
Yeah.
So it does take some getting used to. And at Drake, we actually implemented multi-factor authentication for logging into our network a couple years back. And we really expected it to be like a super tough lift, people having to remember their tokens or their phone. And we had a couple bumps for a few weeks, but everybody's really gotten used to it. And I get the emails every time somebody has locked themselves out using multi-factor, and it happens maybe 3 times a week. So it's really just getting into the habit of it. Yeah. And the amount of protection that multi-factor offers you, whether it's desktop software, whether it's a website, whether it's accessing an account of some sort, you're pretty much about 99.9% protected as long as you're using either a hard token or a soft token. So
that's good news.
And those aren't that 99% is the actual industry-wide, not just tax software, like as far as all account-driven services. So
that's great. So basically you just tell people, we know you don't love typing in your password. No one does. Right. I don't love it. No. But you're used to it. Sure. And you'll get used to this too. Sure. And it'll be just because while no one loves it, they have that rhythm, right? You sit down, you're in. Yep. Now it's going to be and then plugging in or doing whatever your token requires.
Right.
The multi-factor authentication piece.
Sure.
And then you're into your work and you're doing your thing.
Sure. So one thing I do want to say, though, as far as hard tokens goes, if you leave them plugged into your USB drive, there's no point even having MFA. So right. For that reason, for a lot of folks, it's a lot easier to do a soft token on their phone or on a dongle of some sort.
And just from a personal experience, I've actually used those before because of all things online video gaming. Mm-hmm. World of Warcraft, not trying to plug them or anything, but they had a hard token, and you could download the soft tokens.
Sure.
And so it really is one of those things where it becomes just second nature. It's not an
sure.
issue. Once you are used to doing it, it's just another habit.
Right.
All right. Now, the last 3 would be backups, drive encryption, and then VPNs.
Sure.
And let's just start with backups.
Okay. So you can't just start with backups. It kind of bleeds over into drive encryption and ransomware and so on and so forth. But it's pretty surprising how many folks are not doing a physical backup of their data. And by a physical backup, I mean a backup that is accessible outside of the network or the hard drive on which the data resides. Doing a backup prevents you from so many things.
Yeah.
From the simple computer crash to the power surge,
right.
to now ransomware, to any number of things. And we recommend at Drake backing up daily, which again, carving out time to do it.
Right.
It's one more thing on the daily task list. But we have had a lot of ransomware attacks recently in the tax software space on our tax preparers' computers where they couldn't pay the ransom or didn't want to pay the ransom for whatever reason and just said, okay, I'm just throwing that computer in the trash. And then they're like, oh, no, I've lost everything.
Yeah.
And they say, well, do you guys have a backup of our stuff we've sent to you? No, we sure don't. So it's important for so many reasons. Like I said, anything from a hardware failure to natural disaster,
right.
And
we're talking about hurricane season right now as a thing, and
sure.
people are having to deal with that even from previous hurricane seasons.
Yep.
Recovering data.
Yep.
Basically recovering your business.
Yep. Unfortunately, in the digital world that we live in now, you're only your business is only as stable as your retention and protection of your data for your clients and for your business.
Right.
And having that backup, probably 98% of us are never going to need that backup. We're never going to need it. But the 2% of us that do, I mean, it can kill your business.
Yeah. And making the backup isn't, like you said, it's not a heavy lift.
Right.
Just
Sure.
You can find a service, you can
Yep.
find a software
Yep.
that you need to do it.
Yeah.
And like you said, drive encryption is tied to that.
It is.
Could you explain what drive encryption is for people who might not necessarily know anything about it?
So drive-in encryption is a technology that basically uses mathematical functions to encrypt the data that's at rest on an actual hard drive, which makes it, in the event that your laptop is stolen or somebody gained unauthorized access to even your desktop or network, it just provides that extra level of authentication to say, is the person that's accessing this device authorized to do so based on those mathematical functions?
And the reason why those two things pair up so well with backups and data encryption is, again, as you said, if you have a literal physical hard drive that you've used as a backup and someone steals that, then they can't access the information.
That's correct. That's correct.
And finally, the one that really trips us up, even if you know something about tech, you might not really understand what a VPN, a virtual private network. What is a VPN for the layman?
So a virtual private network is basically a tunnel into a system where you authenticate yourself and can access certain data or transmit certain data without being exposed to the entire virtual or cyber world. There's a couple different ways that VPNs are used. Some of them are used by fraudsters to try to use your account access that they may have already compromised to spoof themselves as being used. So they buy software that says, I want to impersonate that I'm in Franklin, North Carolina, so that when I access Ryan Norton's account, the IP address matches his geolocation. Another way that they are used is for folks to actually access their own systems from a remote location. The intent of the VPN at first that is used in that way was for protection, right? So I have a sore throat, or the contractor's coming to my house today, but I have work to do. So I can VPN into work in a pretty safe connection, in that once I connect to my virtual private network, anything that happens on my physical laptop there's no data exchanged outside of the VPN. So that was the intent of it. But what's happened with certain softwares that we all use for screen sharing for support reasons, Team Viewer, GoToMeeting, things of that sort. Instances of the software aren't always secure, again, because they're not kept up to date, or it's the free version. And so if you're using one of those types of software or have installed it in the past and not kept it up to date, it's another vector that the fraudsters can use. They compromise your username and password. They're in your machine like that. And from the software side, from the compliance side, and the fraud prevention side, we can't tell whether or not it was you or whether or not it was a fraudster, because it's your IP address, because they're literally on your computer acting as you.
Well, since we've kind of briefly explained VPNs and the Security 6, we'll just kind of go through the last few items on the checklist from the Tax Security Together campaign. And the next one would just be, and this one's one that a lot of people are probably coming to grips with now, which would be what is involved in creating a written data security plan?
It's not as ominous as it sounds. And there's a lot of guidelines that are free, easily found on Google. There's paid software. But basically what's involved in it, the first thing you have to do is understand what your data is and where your data is located, so that you know what you're writing a plan for.
Right.
Is your data on a network? Is it on USB keys that are floating around on your employees' keychains? Is it only on your hard drive with a single user login? So the first thing is to figure out what data you have and where it's located. And I just spoke to the digital aspects, but remember the paper aspects as well. You know, we talked about dumpster diving and other podcasts that we've done. So once the data has been mapped out as to where it actually exists, then the next steps are basically to try to come up with scenarios in which that data could be accessed by unauthorized users, and what you would do to react, so that in the event that it does happen to you, you're not trying to think of stuff from scratch to say, okay, so one of my employees had to be fired and they still have their USB key. What do I do? What do I do? And if you've thought through that beforehand, it's kind of just a roadmap guide, for lack of better terms, to say, these are the scenarios I can think of where my data could be compromised, and these are the steps I believe that I should take in the event that happens.
And not to shamelessly plug it, but we do have a rudimentary framework for a security guide on DrakeSoftware.com under the Taxing Subjects blog that you can go to download under the Downloads tab when you go to DrakeSoftware.com/blog. Not that I'm going to shamelessly plug a thing that we worked on.
It's a really great guideline, though.
Yeah.
I might have helped write some of it, so you know.
Not that we want to brag, but that's a definite resource. Like if you hear this and you go, well, I still don't know what to do.
Right, absolutely.
You can go hit the website up.
Absolutely,
take a look.
Absolutely.
And the other thing to say about the data security plan is that it isn't optional.
It is not optional.
You are required by law to have it.
You are by IRS regulation. Every tax office is required to have a data plan. Yep.
And it's because you're considered a financial entity.
Absolutely.
Because you're handling financial data.
Yep.
You don't have to be a bank to be considered a financial entity.
I've never worked for a bank before, but I would say that having somebody's tax information rivals anything that a bank has, because basically you have, as the tax preparer, you know everything there is to know about that tax preparer's home situation,
right?
Financial situation, what their kids' names are, where they go to daycare. Everything that anybody would want to know about somebody is typically contained within a tax preparer's data set.
You are the custodian of
absolutely
the data that can be used to successfully scam banks to get a credit card loan, to successfully scam the Treasury to get a refund.
Absolutely.
So it can be real bad news if someone gets a hold of that data.
Absolutely.
One of the things that catches people, what is the phrase? The weakest link in the security chain is always people.
Sure, absolutely.
Phishing emails. They target people because they know that if you have a good firewall installed, they know if you have taken proper security steps, it may be hard to crack your network, but it can be easier to crack people.
It is. It's 100% easier. It's the whole reason that the cybersecurity is even a thing is because, as you said, the human is the weakest link, and this whole technology can solve a lot of things, but it can't solve the way a human brain works or what human activity actually is. And so phishing emails are something that it seems a lot of times to me, I'm like, how are we still dealing with phishing emails? Like, what have we not figured out as a group of technology experts around the world how to stop phishing emails? But it goes back to what I was saying earlier about zero-day attacks. There's always going to be phishing emails that get through that have scripts embedded or malware embedded for all types of malicious activities, and the main vector for many of those programs is through phishing emails. And the fraudsters have gotten so sophisticated at them that it's difficult for security experts to even recognize a lot of them. I have a friend who works for a company in Florida whose CFO, I'm not even kidding you, wired $230,000 based off of a phishing email last week. It's an old scam, and this is a CFO. This is not a person who is uneducated and doesn't know how to protect data and protect their company. That's how good the email was. So ongoing education of phishing emails is something that we do at Drake Software, and that I am assuming most companies do. But really, in the end, it's about keeping the light on, staying vigilant, whether you know, as humans, to take that extra time before you download unknown attachments or click that link or respond to an email with any type of information that could give them any access to the keys to your kingdom.
Right. And before we started recording, we were joking about just the deluge of emails you get.
Yes.
It's just, you have so many. And so that's what they're preying on. They know that business professionals
Absolutely.
get lots of emails, and you kind of become numb to the number, and you just want to click through it and get it off your list and move on.
Sure.
And that's dangerous.
It is. I get, I was telling you, Ryan, earlier, I get hundreds of emails every day. And there's times when I've come this close to responding to something, going, check yourself.
Yeah.
Check yourself. So
just look for the signs of those things, and like Jami said, stay vigilant. You can't even trust attachments from people you know.
Absolutely.
Without running a virus scan on that attachment, if you're expecting it.
Sure.
You have to be careful, because they may not know that they're infected with malware.
Right.
And they're just going about their business. You needed to get this spreadsheet sent to you.
And even personal emails, like I've talked about in previous podcasts, about the pictures of my niece that came through in a zip file from my sister. It said it was from my sister, and it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for her to download or upload all the pictures of Kinsey into a zip file and send it to me, and
Yeah.
So you just never know. And we actually there are different types of software that you can install on your network or on your standalone computer that basically run a check on anytime you try to install, or your computer tries to install any type of update or open a zip file or launch any type of script that will kind of quarantine those files and those actions for you before they take place, so that you can review them and hopefully know whether or not it's something that is okay to install on your computer or not. So,
like you said, that may not catch a 0-day attack, but the number of 0-day attacks is far outnumbered by the stuff that's been out there, because they know that people will click it.
Yep.
One of the last few things we want to talk about today would be just some common signs of data theft. Could you just go through like just a handful? I know that the IRS just released like a list of 12, I think.
Sure.
And we can just kind of go through some of the common ones for people.
Unfortunately, I couldn't remember all 12 off the top of my head, being put on the spot anyway.
Jami, come on.
So in specific for tax preparers and tax offices, one of the first things is when clients' returns start to reject as already been filed with the IRS or state. That's very common. It's actually called IRS Reject 902, and we see a massive amount of those, and a lot of them are false positives. Tax preparers accidentally sent the same tax return twice, or what have you. But as long as you're managing your filed returns, you should have a pretty good idea. If you start to get back, a lot of clients have an already accepted tax return, and you know that you didn't file them. Another thing that you can do is through IRS e-services, you can compare the number of returns that have been filed using your electronic filing identification number to the number of returns that you know you've filed. Given it's not exactly real time, but it should be fairly close in a ballpark. Meaning, it might take a 4 to 24 hours to post the last 3 returns you filed, but you'll have a fairly good idea of it.
And that one's a big one too. And we've talked about it before, but they target tax professionals so that they can use your software and your database to file those fraudulent returns and try to get refund money. And if they have access to it, they're going to do it.
They sure will. There's also an identity verification called ID Verify program through the IRS, where if for some reason a taxpayer's filing hit the IRS's taxpayer protection program filters, in some cases the IRS will send out a letter asking the taxpayer to verify it was them that filed the tax return. So if you have customers or taxpayers who are receiving these letters and coming to your office and you haven't filed their return, they haven't filed somewhere else, that's a really great sign. And this is a newer program to the IRS, and it seems to be fairly effective, even if there is snail mail involved. But the IRS will never email you or your clients. So that's something to keep in mind.
Are there signs that manifest on your actual machine
Sure.
that you may have had a data theft incident?
Sure. So some of the signs are real time, and then some of them can be discovered after the fact. So an example of a real time, and this ties back into our VPN conversation, is that somebody has unauthorized access to your computer through a VPN program, and you may be sitting there speaking with your client. I'm interviewing Ryan and blah, blah, blah. And out of the corner of my eye, I see my mouse moving around on my computer screen. I'm the only one sitting there. Somebody could be in your computer.
It's not haunted.
It's not haunted. It's not haunted. Some other signs could be seeing activity on tax returns with timestamps when you weren't in the office, maybe from 2 to 4 a.m. And you're like, well, that's kind of strange. So
Probably wasn't you.
it probably wasn't you. Definitely wasn't me. I'm in bed.
And so those are just kind of a handful of things you can kind of look out for. Again, the IRS did publish a list of 12 items. You should be able to find that on their IRS tax tips, I think.
Yeah, taxes security together as well. You can get to it off the main page of irs.gov.
There you go. One of the last things we'll talk about, what are some data security scams that exist right now that may, if they're not new, maybe they're newsworthy?
Sure. So I actually want to tell you a story about something that happened to me about 3 weeks ago now. I think it was like a Saturday afternoon. I definitely wasn't at work. I'd been near my phone, and I got back to my phone, and I had a phone call from Verizon, from their 800 number, and I use Verizon, so it automatically pops up on my phone as Verizon. I'm like, that's strange. So I listened to the voicemail. It said, hey, we had a problem processing your automatic payment. Call us back, and it gave a different number. I came this close to falling for it. I thought, no, I'm going to call their main number. So the girl who picks up says, yeah, this is a recent scam, and people are falling for it left and right. And I was thinking, I work in security. I almost fell for this plan. So back to being vigilant, right?
Right.
Like I said, I was this close to just calling back the number in my transcripted voicemail. It's right there. And so that's one of the scams that's out there that's not directly tax related, but that's how sophisticated that they are getting right now. What we're seeing a lot of in the tax industry right now is a lot of ransomware attacks. And if you follow the news in the tech world, 23 in Texas government, the city of Atlanta, and the city of Baltimore. And the city of Baltimore released the actual monetary cost publicly of what the ransomware attack cost them was $18.2 million.
That makes you sick.
It makes you sick. And the way ransomware works is it's, other than the creator of the actual ransomware virus or software, if you will, that's installed on your machine, the keys to unencrypt the data are only in the mind of the creator. They can't be reversed. I think I saw a stat somewhere. It was like some tons of man years to try to reverse a well-written hash key. So
yeah, and that just kind of goes back to a number of things, because like you said, the vectors they can use to try to affect you with that can be phishing emails. It could be if they run a script or something that takes advantage of an unpatched vulnerability, which is with that WannaCry thing we talked about. That is that is how they did it. Like, the people didn't patch their Windows because they're like, oh, it's gonna be 30 minutes. I ain't got time.
Right. So. And I think it's important to know, as Ryan and I also keep dancing around this, is that there's not one piece of this that's going to protect you. It's everything has to come together. It's all part of the same picture. So please stop clicking on things.
Right. Well, like you said too, you got that phone call, but you instead called the main number.
Yep.
And that's one thing you might see in a phishing email too, because they try to spoof like sales.
Sure.
Like, you might get something from Burks and it says, click on our flyer here and it'll take you to the sales.
Sure.
What you can do instead, I got an email from Burks. There's a sale, huh? I'll just go to my browser, type in the actual Burks website and go to that instead and check.
Right. Yep.
All right.
Stop clicking, Ryan. Stop clicking.
You know, it's like the big red button. You just have to.
I know.
I can't help myself.
We've taught my niece that red means hot. It's kind of protect, our phones and stuff like that. It worked.
That's hilarious.
She's 2.5, and if she sees anything red, she goes hot.
That is great.
So stay away from those red buttons.
That's right. Well, all right. I think that's it for us today. Jami, thank you so much for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you all on the next Taxing Subjects podcast.